The billionaire's life looked like a dream to everyone who saw him from the outside. He had a house that looked like a palace with high ceilings, grand chandeliers, and rooms so large that people often got lost inside. His cars were the kind people only saw in magazines. He traveled on private jets that made even business class on regular airlines look like a tight, uncomfortable space. Every detail of his life screamed success, power, and wealth. People admired him for his achievements. Very few really understood the person he was beyond the money and the luxury. Despite his wealth, he had always been careful about whom he trusted. Over the years, he had learned that people often acted differently when money was involved. Friends could be fake, business partners could betray you, and even family could sometimes prioritize their own interests over love. But he had learned to be careful, to watch, and to trust his instincts. Still, when it came to love, he allowed himself to hope for something different. That hope was why he believed so deeply in his fiancée. She seemed perfect at first. She was elegant, charming, and attentive in a way that made everyone believe she truly cared about him. At parties, she smiled at him in a way that made him feel like he was the only person in the room. And in private, she always seemed understanding and supportive. Friends and colleagues often commented on how lucky he was, and he would smile politely, but deep down, he didn't let himself get carried away. He had learned that appearances could be deceiving. The staff who worked in his home had seen many people come and go over the years, some genuine, others not. Among them was a maid who had been with him for a long time. She was quiet and unassuming, but her eyes missed nothing. She watched, she noticed, and she remembered. The billionaire had always appreciated her honesty and reliability, even if he didn't always show it. She had cleaned his rooms when no one else was around, served his meals discreetly, and observed without comment, but her loyalty was always clear. She cared not just for her job, but for the man who had treated her with respect over the years. One ordinary morning, as she tidied the master bedroom, something caught her attention. It was a tiny, shiny object tucked into a corner, almost invisible unless someone was looking carefully. Her heart sank as she realized what it was. She had seen devices like this before in news stories' hidden cameras. Someone had placed it there to watch and record. She felt a shiver run down her spine. She had never seen anything like this in his home before, and it worried her deeply. She knew she couldn't ignore it. She carefully examined the device without touching it too much, making mental notes of its location and direction. She wanted to make sure she had the details right before she told him. When she approached the billionaire later that morning, she did so with caution. She knew that this was serious. She had to convey the urgency without sounding paranoid or exaggerating. "Sir," she said, her voice steady but serious, "I need to show you something." "Please, it's important." She led him quietly to the room, pointing to the small, nearly invisible device. "I think someone put a hidden camera here," she said. At first, he didn't believe her. He laughed lightly, assuming it must be a misunderstanding. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Maybe it's just something that fell, or a decoration?" She shook her head. "I've seen these before, sir. This is a camera, and it's hidden. Someone is trying to watch you." Her tone left no room for doubt. She was not exaggerating. Her years of experience in the household had taught her to notice unusual things. And this was one of them. For the first time that morning, he felt a flicker of concern. He looked closely at the device, examining its size, shape, and placement. It was small, almost unnoticeable, but it was definitely a camera. He realized he had to take this seriously. He had always been cautious, but this was different. This was personal. Someone he trusted or someone very close had crossed a line. The thought made him uneasy. He tried to remember if he had noticed anything unusual in the last few days. Had his fiancée been acting differently? Had she been secretive or distant at times? He remembered a few small things, a phone call she had taken privately. A few moments when she seemed distracted, but he had dismissed them at the time. Now, they seemed more significant. The maid could see the concern in his eyes. She had known he would be shocked, but she also knew he was smart enough to handle it. "Sir, I wanted to warn you before anything else happened," she said. "I don't know who did this, but I thought you should know right away. You deserve to be safe in your own home." He nodded slowly, the seriousness settling in. Thank you for telling me. I appreciate it more than you know." He paused, thinking about the implications. Someone had been trying to invade his privacy, and the betrayal could be close to home. He needed to be careful, not just with the camera, but with everyone around him, including the person he trusted most. Over the next few days, he became more observant. He watched his fiancée closely, noticing small things that he might have overlooked before. He noticed the way she handled her phone, how she sometimes left the room without explanation, and how she reacted when he mentioned certain topics. Each observation added to a growing unease that he couldn't ignore. The maid continued her quiet vigilance. She noticed the billionaire checking his home security. Subtle changes in his routines, and the way he became more attentive to details. She didn't interfere, but she was ready to act if necessary. She had always understood that her role was to support, not to dictate. But she also knew that her instincts were often correct. He decided to take a careful, strategic approach. He couldn't confront her without evidence, and he couldn't ignore the signs. He began documenting small things, messages, unusual behaviors, times when she was alone in the house. He set up discreet checks to ensure he had proof if needed. Each day, his concern grew, but so did his resolve. He was determined to uncover the truth without causing unnecessary drama or putting anyone at risk, even though he felt a sense of betrayal. He also felt a quiet gratitude toward the maid. Without her sharp eyes and careful observation, he might have missed the warning signs completely. She had acted out of loyalty and concern, and her actions had given him a chance to protect himself. It reminded him that trust was not only about love or friendship, it was also about respect, loyalty, and the people who stood quietly beside you, ready to help when you needed it most. As he walked through the grand halls of his mansion, he couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. There was fear, yes, and disappointment, but also a deep awareness that he needed to be smarter, more careful, and more attentive. He had always believed in the importance of vigilance, but now it wasn't just about business, it was personal. Someone close to him might have been planning to take advantage of his trust, and he needed to be ready. The maid continued her work, quiet but watchful. She moved through the rooms, noticing details, making mental notes, keeping a careful eye on everything happening around the billionaire. She knew that her observations could be the key to preventing a bigger problem, and she was determined not to let him down. For the billionaire, life suddenly felt more complicated. The luxury and ease of his days were now shadowed by doubt and suspicion. But he was also determined to face the situation with calm and careful strategy. He knew that revealing the truth would require patience, observation, and the right timing. He also knew that he could trust the maid, who had proven her loyalty in a way that went beyond words. Little did he know, the discovery of the hidden camera was only the beginning. It would lead to shocking revelations, tests of trust, and decisions that would change his personal life forever. But for now, he focused on understanding the situation fully, observing carefully, and preparing himself for whatever truth awaited him. The quiet morning that started like any other had turned into a turning point. The billionaire realized that in a world of wealth, charm, and appearances, the smallest details noticed by the most unexpected people could make the biggest difference. And he knew that he had to pay attention to them, because the consequences of missing even one small sign could be life-changing. The maid's warning had opened his eyes, and he felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. Relief, because he had been warned before it was too late. Anxiety, because he realized how close he had been to being deceived. He understood that the world he lived in was filled with people who might not always be what they seemed, and that trust, once broken, was not easy to repair. And so, the billionaire prepared himself for the days ahead, knowing that careful observation, patience, and the loyalty of those who truly cared would guide him through the storm that was just beginning. After the maid's warning, the billionaire couldn't stop thinking about the hidden camera. It was a strange feeling, a mix of disbelief and worry. He had trusted his fiancée completely, believing that their love was strong and genuine. But now, with the possibility of betrayal staring him in the face, He began to notice small details that had previously seemed unimportant. Every glance, every phone call, every secretive behavior suddenly felt like a potential clue. At first, he tried to push the thoughts aside. Maybe he was overreacting, he told himself. Maybe it was all just a misunderstanding, and the camera had been left there by accident. But deep down, he couldn't shake the unease. The way the device had been placed was deliberate. It was small, hidden, and positioned to capture private areas of his home. No ordinary visitor would think to place something like that, and certainly not someone he trusted. He began observing his fiancée more closely, trying not to make it obvious. He noticed small changes in her routine. She started taking calls in private, sometimes disappearing for longer than necessary. She seemed distracted at times, and occasionally her reactions to casual questions were unusual, almost rehearsed. Every tiny behavior began to feel like a piece of a puzzle that he didn't fully understand yet. The maid always remained quiet but watchful. She continued her work, but her eyes kept returning to the fiancé. She noticed subtle things that the billionaire might not have picked up yet, small hints of secrecy and tension. She didn't speak unless necessary, but her presence was a constant reminder that someone loyal was watching out for him. Her careful observation was already giving him an advantage. Even if he didn't realize how much it mattered, he decided to take cautious steps. Confronting the fiancé without proof could backfire. She might deny everything, and without evidence, he could end up looking paranoid or controlling. Instead, he focused on documenting every small detail. He paid attention to her phone habits, noting times when she was unusually secretive. He observed her interactions with friends and colleagues, and he even checked minor details around the house like doors and windows. To ensure that no other hidden devices had been placed, each observation brought new questions. Why would she do this? Was it about money, control, or something else? He had never imagined a scenario where someone so close would betray him, but the camera made it impossible to ignore. The thought of someone invading his privacy, watching him in his own home, made him tense and cautious. Every small sound, every movement, seemed amplified as he considered the possibilities. He began using subtle methods to test her reactions. Casual questions about privacy, jokes about being watched, or mentioning the camera in passing all, were ways to see how she would respond. He noticed her expressions, the slightest change in tone, the pause before answering. Each small reaction became a clue, a tiny window into her true intentions. He realized that betrayal often reveals itself in the smallest details, and he was determined not to miss them. Meanwhile, the maid continued to observe silently. She had seen this kind of behavior before, where someone close could act perfectly normal on the surface while hiding something entirely different beneath. Her experience gave her a clear sense of what was unusual and what was normal. She had learned to trust her instincts, and in this case, every instinct told her that something was wrong. The billionaire also began reinforcing his own security. He made subtle adjustments around the house, adding extra locks and checking electronic systems. He didn't want to alarm his fiancée or anyone else unnecessarily, but he wanted to be prepared. Every precaution, every careful move, was part of a larger plan to protect himself while gathering the truth. During this time, he also reflected on his past experiences. He remembered situations where trust had been broken, not by enemies or strangers, but by people who seemed close. The lessons he had learned from those experiences helped him remain calm and focused now. He knew that panic or anger would not help. Only careful observation and strategic action could lead to answers. Each day he noticed more small signs. She would sometimes fumble with her phone when he entered the room unexpectedly. She seemed overly concerned with his schedule, asking questions that didn't seem necessary. Even her gestures and tone of voice occasionally hinted at nervousness. All these tiny signals were adding up, creating a pattern that was hard to ignore. The maid, watching from a distance, noticed how carefully he was handling the situation. She felt a quiet sense of pride in her role, knowing that her warning had set this careful observation into motion. She understood that her job wasn't just cleaning rooms, it was protecting the person she worked for, and she took that responsibility seriously. Her eyes missed nothing. Every small observation was added to the growing picture of what might be happening. Despite the growing tension, Billionaire tried to maintain normalcy. He continued with his daily routines, attended meetings, and hosted gatherings in his home. But beneath the surface, he was alert, watching, listening, and noting every detail. He realized that appearances could be deceiving, and maintaining control over the situation required both patience and vigilance. There were moments of doubt, moments when he wondered if he was reading too much into things, but each small piece of evidence reinforced his concern. The hidden camera was real, and the fiancé's behavior was changing in subtle ways. He knew he couldn't ignore the truth, even if it was painful. The anticipation of discovering her intentions was a heavy weight, but he also felt a sense of determination. He had faced challenges before, and he could handle this one too. During this time, he also began considering motives. Why would someone so close act this way? Could it be greed, jealousy, or something more personal? The questions were endless, but he focused on the facts he could observe. He knew that speculation alone would not solve anything. Careful attention to behavior, combined with concrete evidence, was the only way to uncover the truth. As days passed, he noticed small inconsistencies in her explanations for certain actions. A missed appointment, a vague story, a hesitation before answering it seemed minor. But together, they painted a picture of deception. The maid silently nodded to herself whenever she observed these moments. Knowing that he was piecing together the truth carefully and wisely, he also began to reflect on trust and loyalty. The situation reminded him that real loyalty was rare and often invisible until tested. The maid had demonstrated loyalty in a quiet, understated way. Noticing the hidden camera and bringing it to his attention without expecting anything in return, that loyalty contrasted sharply with the uncertainty. He now felt about his fiancée. The billionaire realized that he had to balance caution with strategy. He could not act impulsively, but he also could not ignore the warning signs. Every move had to be deliberate, every observation documented, and every step carefully considered. He had learned that in situations like this, patience was as important as awareness. Meanwhile, the fiancée seemed unaware of the growing scrutiny. She continued her daily activities, interacting with him and others as if nothing was wrong. But every interaction became a test, every word a potential clue. He observed carefully, learning to read the small signals that might reveal her true intentions. The maid continued to support him silently, understanding that her role was to provide information, not advice. She maintained her regular tasks while keeping a careful watch over both the billionaire and his fiancée. Her presence was like a quiet shield, protecting him from actions he could not yet anticipate. During these days, he felt a mix of emotions. There was disappointment, because he could not believe someone he loved could be untrustworthy. There was anxiety because the hidden camera represented a real threat to his privacy. But there was also determination, a clear resolve to uncover the truth without causing unnecessary harm. He knew that the outcome depended on careful observation, patience, strategic thinking. Evenings became a time of reflection. He would sit quietly in his study, thinking over the events of the day, reviewing small details and planning his next steps. The hidden camera had changed the way he viewed his home, his relationships, and even himself. He realized that trust could not be given blindly, and that even those closest to him could have motives he could not immediately see. The days turned into a careful routine of observation, reflection, and subtle testing. He learned to notice the small things, the tone of a voice, the hesitation in an answer, the quick glance at a phone. Every detail mattered, and every observation brought him closer to understanding the situation fully. He also began to appreciate the importance of quiet loyalty. The maid who had first noticed the camera had shown him that careful attention. Honesty and courage could make a real difference. Her actions reminded him that the people who truly cared often worked behind the scenes, unnoticed, yet their impact could be profound by the end of the week. He had a clearer picture of the situation. Though he still did not have full confirmation of the fiancé's intentions, he realized that the coming days would be crucial. How he handled the situation now could determine the course of his personal life, his trust, and his relationships. Every move had to be calculated, every observation recorded, and every step approached with care. He knew that the hidden camera was just the beginning. The truth behind it would reveal much more about the people around him, about the intentions of someone he loved, and about the challenges of trust and loyalty in a world where appearances could be deceiving. But he also felt a quiet confidence. He was not alone. The maid had shown him the importance of vigilance and loyalty. And with her help, he felt prepared to face whatever truth was coming his way. And so, the billionaire continued his careful watch, knowing that patience, observation, the guidance of those who truly cared for him would be his greatest allies in uncovering the truth. Days passed, and the billionaire continued his careful observation. Every movement, every word, and every glance from his fiancée was analyzed quietly, almost like a puzzle he had to solve. He was patient, knowing that the truth would reveal itself if he stayed calm and focused. The hidden camera had shaken him, but it had also sharpened his awareness. Nothing could be left to chance. He noticed the smallest details, things that would have seemed unimportant before. A sudden look at the phone, an extra pause in conversation, a change in tone when discussing money or family matters. All these moments added to a growing suspicion that he could no longer ignore. His intuition, usually reliable, told him that the betrayal he feared was real. The maid remained a silent presence, observing as well. She had long understood that her role went beyond cleaning and serving. She was there to notice, to protect, and to guide when necessary. Every day, she watched from a distance, noting how he handled the situation, ready to step in if needed. Her loyalty gave him a subtle reassurance that someone trusted him completely and saw things clearly without bias. He decided to take a more strategic approach. Confronting someone without evidence could backfire, so he began to gather proof in ways that were discreet and careful. He checked rooms for any other hidden devices, reviewed security footage, and started keeping a record of small interactions that seemed suspicious. Each detail was logged carefully, creating a timeline that might one day reveal the bigger picture at the same time. He paid attention to her reactions in ways that did not seem confrontational. Casual questions about daily routines, playful remarks about privacy, and indirect comments about personal security became tests. He watched her closely, noting how she reacted when she thought no one was paying attention. Some reactions were fleeting, almost imperceptible, but to him, they were valuable clues. It was during one ordinary evening that he noticed something he could not ignore. She had left her phone on the counter momentarily unattended while she went to another room. He noticed a series of messages that appeared and disappeared quickly. The words were brief but clear instructions for the placement of cameras, reminders to check angles, and mentions of private spaces. The realization hit him with a mix of disbelief and anger. The suspicion he had tried to suppress was now confirmed. He took a moment to steady himself. His heart raced, and he felt a wave of betrayal that cut deeper than anything he had expected. This was someone he had trusted completely, someone he had imagined sharing his life with. Yet here was proof that she had been planning something deceitful right under his nose. He knew he had to remain calm, no matter how difficult it was. Impulsiveness could ruin everything, and he needed to handle this carefully. The maid, noticing his reaction, remained quiet but supportive. She could see the tension in his face, the subtle clenching of his fists, and the brief pause in his breathing. She understood the weight of the moment and knew that her presence, even silently, was a reminder that he was not alone. She had been the first to warn him, and now she watched as he pieced the situation together with careful precision. He decided to monitor her more closely while continuing to gather evidence. Over the next few days, he discovered that she had placed multiple cameras, not just the one he had initially found. Each device was carefully hidden, aimed to capture private moments and sensitive information. The scale of the deception stunned him. This was not a small act of curiosity. It was a deliberate invasion of his privacy. Planned with care and intention, the discovery forced him to think about motives. Why would she do this? Was it purely for financial gain, or was there something more personal at play? The more he considered it, the more he realized that understanding her intentions would be key to deciding how to handle the situation. He had to know why she had done it before taking any action. At the same time, he became increasingly aware of the need for caution. He could not confront her yet. She had no idea he had discovered the full extent of her actions, and any hint of suspicion might make her take steps to cover her tracks. He needed to be patient, to observe, and to gather undeniable proof before revealing anything. The fiancé continued to act normally in public, showing no signs of guilt or concern. To the outside world, everything seemed perfect. But to him, every interaction was now loaded with potential meaning. Every word she spoke, every gesture she made, became part of the puzzle he was assembling. The contrast between her public composure and the private evidence he had discovered only deepened his understanding of how carefully she had planned this betrayal. During this time, the billionaire also reflected on his own feelings. He felt hurt and disappointed, but he also felt a quiet determination. This was not just about betrayal, it was about control, trust, and understanding the people around him. He knew that reacting emotionally could lead to mistakes, so he focused on clarity, observation, and preparation. Every detail mattered, and he could not afford to overlook anything. The maid continued to assist in subtle ways. She noticed the small changes in his demeanor, the way he became more alert, the careful way he moved around the house. She also kept an eye on the fiancée, noting when she behaved suspiciously or took actions that seemed unusual. Her presence provided a quiet stability in the midst of a growing tension, reminding him that loyalty and vigilance were sometimes more important than wealth or power. He realized that this situation was testing him in ways he had never anticipated. It was not only about uncovering betrayal, but also about understanding the depth of human nature. People could be charming, loving, and persuasive on the surface, while hiding intentions that were completely different. He had always known this intellectually, but now he was experiencing it personally. As the days went on, he gathered more evidence, including recordings and timestamps of messages and movements. Each piece of proof confirmed what he already suspected, yet he still needed to be careful. He understood that confronting someone with half-truths or incomplete information could escalate the situation. Only full understanding, complete evidence, and a clear plan could lead to the right resolution. The fiancée remained unaware that he knew the extent of her actions. She continued to act normally, smiling, engaging in conversations, and maintaining appearances. To the outsider, nothing seemed wrong. But the billionaire now saw the reality behind the facade. He knew that appearances could be deceiving, and he had learned that even the most trusted people could harbor secrets. The hidden cameras were more than just devices. They represented a betrayal of trust so deep that it shook him to his core. He realized that this was not only about privacy, but about respect, loyalty, and the fundamental honesty that he had always valued. The discovery made him rethink his relationships, his assumptions, and the people he allowed close to him. The maid continued her quiet watch, understanding that the situation required patience as much as vigilance. She had been the first to notice the initial warning, and now she remained an essential part of the process, observing, noting details, and ensuring that he had the support he needed without interfering directly. Her loyalty was a contrast to the betrayal he had discovered, a reminder that trust and honesty could still exist in unexpected ways. The billionaire reflected on the lessons he was learning. Trust could not be given blindly, and appearances were never a reliable guide. Even love and affection could mask intentions that were completely self-serving. He realized that he needed to be careful, not only in confronting the betrayal, but in rebuilding his understanding of the people around him. He also began to think about the consequences. The discovery of the hidden cameras meant that he had undeniable proof of her actions. He had the ability to confront her with certainty, but he also had to consider the best way to do so. Anger and impulsiveness could make the situation worse, but careful planning, patience, and clarity could lead to a resolution that preserved his dignity and security. The days of observation and evidence gathering began to reveal the full picture. He saw not only the actions themselves, but also the careful planning behind them. Every camera, every message, every attempt to observe him was deliberate. The betrayal was intentional and calculated, not accidental or casual. The realization deepened his resolve to handle the situation wisely. Even as he processed his feelings of hurt, anger, and disappointment, he also felt a quiet sense of empowerment. He now had the knowledge, the evidence, and the awareness needed to act decisively when the time was right. The hidden camera, once a symbol of fear and uncertainty, had become a tool for understanding and preparation. Throughout it all, the maid remained a silent partner in vigilance. Her early warning had set everything in motion, and her careful observation continued to provide reassurance. She was a reminder that loyalty and attentiveness often mattered more than wealth or power, and that the smallest actions could prevent the greatest mistakes. By the end of this period, the billionaire had a complete understanding of the situation. He had undeniable proof of the fiancée's betrayal and had gathered sufficient information to confront her confidently. The path ahead required caution, strategy, and clear communication, but he was ready. The discovery of the hidden cameras had revealed not only deceit, but also the strength of careful observation, patience, and the quiet loyalty of someone who truly cared for him. He realized that the coming confrontation would be difficult, but it was necessary. The truth had to come out, and he would face it with clarity, dignity, and the support of those who had shown real loyalty. The lessons of patience, vigilance, and careful planning had prepared him for the moment. When everything would finally be revealed, the hidden cameras had changed his world, exposing deception and testing his understanding of trust, but they had also shown him the importance of careful observation, strategic thinking, and the quiet strength of those who truly cared. He was ready to uncover the full truth, knowing that his patience and careful planning would guide him through what was to come. The day of confrontation arrived, and the billionaire felt a strange mixture of tension and determination. Every step he took that morning seemed heavier than usual. He knew what he had discovered, and he knew the proof he had gathered was undeniable. The hidden cameras had revealed not just a simple act of curiosity, but a carefully planned invasion of his privacy. He had to face it, and there was no turning back now. He prepared himself mentally. He reviewed all the evidence once more, messages, recordings, and observations he had noted over days of careful scrutiny. He wanted to be certain he was calm, rational, and ready. Anger could cloud judgment, and he needed a clear mind to confront someone who had betrayed him so personally. He reminded himself to speak slowly, clearly, and without letting emotions take control. This confrontation had to be handled with precision. The fiancée appeared in the living room, smiling as if everything was ordinary. She had no idea that he had pieced together the truth, that he knew about the cameras and the secret planning. To her, this was just another day, filled with the usual conversations and casual interactions. But he saw through the facade. Every gesture, every word, and every glance now carried a different meaning. He began calmly, almost gently, drawing her attention to the small details that had raised his suspicion. "I've noticed some unusual things lately," he said, his voice steady. "Small changes, odd habits, and situations that didn't make sense. At first I thought it might just be my imagination, but then I found something that confirmed my fears." He paused. Giving her a moment to absorb the words, her smile faltered slightly, just enough for him to notice. She tried to maintain composure, but he could see the subtle tension in her shoulders. The quick glance to the side, the brief hesitation before responding. Every reaction he had observed over the past days now became part of the confrontation. He showed her the first piece of evidence, the hidden camera she had placed. He explained how he had discovered it, and how it had prompted him to observe more closely. She looked at it, trying to mask her reaction, but her eyes betrayed her momentarily. He could see the guilt, the fear, and the realization that her secret was no longer hidden. He continued calmly, laying out the evidence he had collected over days. Messages, timestamps, and recordings were presented logically, without accusations or raised voices. His goal was clarity, not conflict. He He wanted her to understand that the betrayal was not only obvious, but also completely undeniable. At first she tried to deny it. Her words were careful, rehearsed, and defensive. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her tone firm yet slightly nervous. "Maybe it's a misunderstanding." But he had anticipated this reaction. He didn't let her words distract him. Every statement was countered with proof. Every denial met with evidence. The calm, methodical approach left her with no room to maneuver. He noticed her composure weakening with every piece of evidence presented. The subtle cracks in her demeanor, the slight trembling of hands, the uneven breathing, the avoidance of eye contact, told him more than words ever could. The betrayal, once hidden, was now fully exposed. And she realized that she could no longer control the narrative. The room grew tense, filled with the weight of unspoken truths and the undeniable reality of deception. The billionaire remained calm, yet there was a quiet intensity in his gaze. He spoke deliberately, emphasizing the seriousness of the actions without shouting or dramatizing. Every word was measured, every pause intentional. He wanted the truth to sink in, to be acknowledged, to leave no doubt about the consequences. She finally began to speak, her voice low and uncertain. She admitted her actions, explaining in fragments that it had been about control, about knowing everything that was happening in his life, and about securing advantages that she thought she deserved. Her explanations were weak, full of hesitation and defensiveness. She realized that the truth could no longer be hidden behind charm or smiles. The billionaire listened carefully, observing not only her words, but also her tone, gestures, and expressions. He understood that this confession was as much about fear as it was about honesty. She had been caught, and now the carefully constructed facade was crumbling. Her intentions, once hidden, were now laid bare, revealing motives that were selfish and manipulative. The maid, who had been quietly present nearby, watched the exchange with careful attention. She had warned him, supported him, and observed every step. And now she saw the final pieces of the puzzle falling into place. Her earlier warning had prevented a disaster. Her vigilance had ensured that he faced the truth with clarity and confidence. She felt a quiet sense of satisfaction, knowing that her observation had made a difference. The billionaire continued to address the situation calmly. He did not raise his voice, did not make threats, and did not act impulsively. Instead, he focused on clarity, boundaries, and consequences. He explained that trust, once broken, could not easily be restored, and that such actions could not be tolerated. His words were firm, leaving no room for misunderstanding. Yet they carried a controlled composure that emphasized strength rather than anger. She reacted in different ways: initial denial, shifting to partial admissions, and eventually, reluctant acknowledgement. Each stage of her response revealed more about her intentions, her fear, and the realization that she could not manipulate the situation anymore. The calm, methodical approach of the billionaire forced her to confront the reality of her actions fully. As the confrontation continued, he explained the broader implications. It wasn't just about privacy. It was about respect, honesty, and the basic trust required in any relationship. Her actions had violated that trust in a way that could not be overlooked. He emphasized that the evidence he had collected was thorough and indisputable, leaving her with no room to argue or escape responsibility. Throughout the discussion, he remained composed, aware of the importance of handling the situation with care. He understood that impulsive reactions could lead to escalation or public embarrassment. So, he focused on rationality and control. His goal was not revenge. It was to ensure the truth was known and that appropriate boundaries were established. The tension in the room gradually shifted as she moved from defensive statements to reluctant acknowledgement. She began to express a vague sense of regret, though it was clear that fear and self-preservation motivated much of her response. The billionaire noted this, understanding that the acknowledgement was part of the process, but did not erase the betrayal. The confrontation reached a turning point. When he asked direct questions about the cameras, her motives, and the planning involved, her answers were hesitant, inconsistent, and incomplete, revealing not only deception but also the depth of the manipulation. Each answer reinforced his understanding that the betrayal had been intentional and calculated. The billionaire took a moment to summarize the situation calmly. He outlined the evidence, the behavior patterns, and the implications clearly, ensuring that she understood the seriousness of the situation. His controlled demeanor contrasted with the emotional turmoil she was experiencing, highlighting the difference between calculated observation and impulsive action. The maid remained silent but attentive, ready to provide support if necessary. Her presence reminded him that loyalty and careful observation mattered, even when deception threatened to dominate. She had been the first to notice the warning signs, and now she witnessed the culmination of her insight in the confrontation itself. By the end of the discussion, it was clear that the truth had been fully exposed. The fiancée had admitted to her actions. Her motives were known, and the consequences were understood. The billionaire had remained calm, composed, and in control, ensuring that the revelation did not turn into chaos, but instead became a moment of clarity and understanding. He then explained the immediate steps that would follow. All hidden cameras would be removed, privacy restored, and boundaries reinforced. The relationship could not continue under these circumstances, and he made it clear that trust, once broken in such a way, could not be repaired. His words were firm, leaving no ambiguity, but they were delivered with dignity rather than aggression. Throughout the confrontation, he maintained a focus on the facts, the evidence, and the necessary actions. He did not let emotions cloud his judgment, recognizing that clarity and strategy were essential. The betrayal had been significant, but his response emphasized control, awareness, and the importance of addressing the situation decisively. The fiancée, now fully aware that her deception had been uncovered, had no option but to accept the reality of the situation. Her attempts at manipulation were no longer effective. She realized that the carefully constructed plan had been completely exposed. The confrontation, handled with patience and evidence, had achieved its purpose. After the discussion, the billionaire reflected on the lessons learned. Trust had been violated, yes, but the situation had also highlighted the importance of vigilance, careful observation, and loyalty. The maid, whose quiet attention had started everything, had proven the value of insight and dedication. He recognized that people who truly cared often acted quietly, without expectation, but their influence could be life-changing. The experience also reinforced the importance of careful, rational action in the face of betrayal. Emotions could be overwhelming, but strategy, patience, and evidence ensured that the truth was uncovered and that consequences were managed effectively. He had learned that appearances could be deceiving, but careful observation and logical action could reveal reality clearly by the end of the confrontation. The situation was resolved in a way that preserved dignity, established boundaries, and ensured clarity. The betrayal had been exposed, the evidence had been presented, and trust had been reevaluated. The billionaire felt a mixture of relief, disappointment, and resolve. Relief that the truth was known, disappointment that someone he trusted had acted deceitfully, and resolve to ensure that such deception could not happen again. The maid, as always, remained quietly supportive. Her presence a reminder that loyalty and careful observation often mattered more than wealth or appearances. She had helped guide the process from the very beginning, and her insight had proven invaluable. Her quiet vigilance had made the confrontation possible and had ensured that the billionaire approached the situation with clarity and confidence in the days that followed. The cameras were removed and privacy was restored. Boundaries were reinforced, and the billionaire took steps to ensure that such an invasion could never happen again. He also reflected on the importance of loyalty, observation, and patience, recognizing that these qualities were often more powerful than wealth, charm, or outward appearances. The confrontation had been difficult, but it had also been necessary. It revealed the true nature of those involved, clarified the boundaries of trust, and reinforced the importance of careful action in the face of betrayal. The lessons learned would guide him in the future, ensuring that he remained vigilant, aware, and prepared for any challenges that might arise. The hidden cameras, once symbols of deception and betrayal had now become evidence, lessons, and reminders. The situation had been handled with calm, strategy, and dignity, and the billionaire emerged with a clearer understanding of trust, loyalty, and the people who truly cared about him after the confrontation. Life in the billionaire's home slowly began to return to a sense of calm. The tension that had been building over days, weeks even, had finally reached its peak, and the truth was now out in the open. The hidden cameras were removed, the evidence carefully stored, and the boundaries clearly set. Yet even though the immediate danger had passed, the experience had left its mark. It was impossible to forget the betrayal, impossible to ignore the lessons it had taught. He spent the next few days reflecting quietly, alone in his study, considering everything that had happened. It was not only the actions of his fiancée that had affected him, but the process that had led to the discovery, the careful observation, and the support he'd received from the maid. Her vigilance had been the first warning, the initial spark that had allowed him to uncover the truth before it caused irreversible damage. He realized that in a world of wealth and influence, true loyalty often came from unexpected places. The billionaire thought about trust. He realized that it was a delicate thing, something that could be built over years but destroyed in a single moment of deception. The experience made him more cautious, more aware of how easily appearances could mask true intentions. But it also reminded him of the importance of careful observation, of paying attention to small details that others might overlook. Without that awareness, he might have continued in blissful ignorance, vulnerable to manipulation. He reflected on the fiancée, her charm, her grace, and the way she had seemed perfect. He remembered the moments when he had believed in her completely, the times when he had felt certain of her loyalty. Those memories now felt heavy, like they had been built on a false foundation. Yet even in the disappointment, he understood something important. People are complex. Even those we love can have motives that are hidden from view. It was not just betrayal. It was a lesson in human nature. The maid continued her work as usual, quietly, diligently, and without fanfare. She moved through the home, keeping her watchful eye on the details, while ensuring that daily life ran smoothly. The billionaire noticed her steady presence, feeling a sense of gratitude that he did not always express. She had not sought praise or recognition, but her loyalty had proven invaluable. He understood that her dedication was a rare and precious quality, something that could not be bought or forced. Over the following weeks, he focused on restoring a sense of normalcy. The home was checked for security again. Systems were updated, and routines were adjusted to ensure privacy and safety. He felt a renewed appreciation for his own vigilance, understanding that even in the midst of luxury and power, careful attention to detail was essential. The hidden cameras had been a stark reminder that appearances could be deceiving, and that the people we trust most can sometimes surprise us in ways we never expect. He also began to reflect on his emotions. There had been anger, of course, and disappointment, but there was also a sense of relief. Relief that he had discovered the truth before it caused irreversible harm. Relief that he had handled the situation calmly and strategically. And relief that he had the support of someone loyal. Someone who had acted without expectation or reward. It was a complex mix of feelings, but ultimately, it left him stronger and more aware. The experience changed the way he approached relationships. He realized that trust must be earned continuously, not assumed. He understood that vigilance was not a sign of paranoia, but a necessary part of protecting oneself and one's life. And he recognized that those who truly care do so quietly, without drawing attention to themselves, yet their impact can be profound. The maid's actions had demonstrated this clearly, and he carried that lesson forward in everything he did. As time went on, he also began to consider forgiveness not in the sense of returning to the relationship or excusing the actions, but as a way to release the burden of anger. Holding on to resentment would not change the past or restore trust. Understanding the motives, acknowledging the betrayal, and setting clear boundaries allowed him to move forward with clarity. He realized that forgiveness, in this sense, was about regaining peace of mind rather than accepting wrongdoing. The fiancée was no longer part of his daily life, and he made sure that all interactions were minimal and formal. He did not allow the betrayal to define him or control his future. Instead, he focused on his own growth, on learning from the experience, and on reinforcing the principles that mattered to him: trust, loyalty, vigilance, and clear boundaries. The lessons were painful, but they were necessary. He also thought about the importance of observation, of noticing the small details that others might dismiss. The hidden cameras had been discovered not by chance, but because someone had paid attention, someone had acted on instinct and experience. That active observation had prevented what could have been a much greater disaster. It reminded him that in life, paying attention to small things can make a huge difference, and that those who are quietly attentive often provide the most value. The billionaire began to rebuild his sense of personal space and security. He updated systems, reinforced protocols, and ensured that every corner of his life was protected. But more than the physical measures, he focused on mental and emotional vigilance. He understood that trust must be managed, that relationships require continuous awareness, and that true loyalty is demonstrated through consistent, observable actions. He also took time to acknowledge the people who had been loyal, particularly the maid. She had acted without hesitation, without expectation of reward, and with a clear sense of responsibility. Her actions had prevented harm and had allowed him to approach the situation with clarity and confidence. He understood that her loyalty was rare and valuable, and he made sure to treat her with respect, gratitude, and fairness. In quiet moments, he reflected on how easily life could be disrupted by deception. One small act, a hidden camera, a secret plan, could shake the foundations of trust and security. Yet he also saw that careful observation, strategic thinking, and support from those who truly cared could restore balance and prevent damage. The experience taught him that vigilance and patience were not weaknesses, but strengths. He also learned about human nature in a deeper way. People can appear charming, loving, and trustworthy, yet have intentions that are self-serving or manipulative. The experience had shown him that reality often differs from appearances, and that careful observation and proof are necessary to navigate the complexities of relationships. The lessons were uncomfortable. They were invaluable. The billionaire found comfort in routine and structure. Focusing on the parts of life that he could control, he ensured that his home was a safe space, that his staff was reliable, and that his own actions reflected the clarity and composure he had developed. The betrayal had tested him, but he emerged with a stronger understanding of trust, vigilance, and loyalty. He also considered the broader implications of the experience. It was a reminder that wealth and status do not protect anyone from deception, and that even those who seem closest can act against your interests. The key, he realized, was not to isolate oneself or to distrust everyone, but to balance trust with observation, awareness, and preparation. The lessons would guide him in all future relationships, both personal and professional. The maid continued her work as if nothing had changed, but the billionaire noticed the quiet confidence in her actions. She had proven her loyalty through observation, discretion, and care, and he made sure she knew that her efforts were appreciated. Her presence was a reminder that even in a world of wealth and power, the actions of those who truly care matter most. Over time, he allowed himself to move forward. The pain of betrayal softened, replaced by understanding and clarity. He had learned lessons that would guide him for years, lessons about trust, about vigilance, about human nature, and about the value of those who act quietly but faithfully. The experience had been difficult, but it had also been transformative. He reflected on the way small actions can have profound consequences. The hidden camera, the careful observation, the maid's warning, they were all pieces of a chain that led to the truth. Without each piece, the outcome could have been very different. He realized that life often depends on noticing the details, acting with care, and valuing loyalty in those around you. As the days turned into weeks, he focused on rebuilding his sense of security and trust. He maintained careful observation, but without paranoia. He allowed himself to interact with people, to form new connections, and to rebuild a sense of normalcy. The lessons of the past guided him, ensuring that he approached life with both caution and clarity. The experience also deepened his appreciation for the people who had remained loyal. The maid, whose quiet vigilance had saved him from harm, became a symbol of true loyalty and dedication. Her actions reminded him that even in a world filled with deception, honesty, and care could still exist, and they were worth recognizing and valuing. He began to focus on the future, applying the lessons he had learned. Trust would be given carefully, loyalty would be valued deeply, and vigilance would remain a constant part of his life. The betrayal had been painful, but it had also been a powerful teacher, showing him the importance of awareness, patience, and strategic thinking. He also reflected on the personal growth that came from the experience. The confrontation, the discovery, and the aftermath had strengthened his understanding of himself and others. He realized that challenges, even painful ones, could reveal strengths and insights that were otherwise hidden. The betrayal had tested him, but it had also prepared him for a stronger, more aware future. In the end, the billionaire emerged from the ordeal with a renewed sense of clarity and purpose. The fiancée was gone, the cameras removed, and his privacy restored. But the lessons remained. He had learned to value loyalty, to trust wisely, and to observe carefully. He had learned that even in a world of wealth and appearances, the truth could be uncovered with patience, vigilance, and careful attention to detail. The maid, ever present and quietly vigilant, remained a source of reassurance. She had acted without expectation, without reward, and with unwavering dedication. Her loyalty had made the difference, and he carried that lesson forward in all aspects of his life. Life in the mansion returned to a sense of normalcy, but it was a new normal, informed by experience and strengthened by understanding. The hidden cameras had been a warning, a test, and ultimately a lesson in trust, loyalty, and awareness. The billionaire had faced betrayal, confronted it, and emerged with wisdom, clarity, and a renewed respect for the people who truly mattered. He understood now that true security came not only from wealth or power, but from vigilance, careful observation, and the quiet loyalty of those who cared. The experience had been difficult, but it had also been transformative, leaving him wiser, stronger, and more prepared for whatever life might bring next.